Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Coming up this week, we're going to answer some of your questions posted on our DVC fan Facebook page on this week's episode of the DVC Show. The DVC Show is brought to you by the DVC Store. For more than 25 years, the DVC Store has been helping people save money on Disney Vacation Club. Check out all their current resale listings at dvcstore.com or give them a call at 1-800-550-6493. And by the DVC forums on disboards.com. Check out some of the great information on every aspect of DVC at disboards.com and join in the conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show, coming to you from the Bob Varley Studio in Orlando, Florida. This is my fourth take trying to get this right, okay? Just going to say, I'm very happy I made it this far. I'm your host, Pete Werner, joined at the table this week by my good friends, Miss Jackie Gailey.
Hi, everybody.
From the DVC Store, Miss Jamie Carr.
Hey.
Our producer, Mr. Corey Fiasconaro.
Hey, guys.
And joining us via Skype, Mr. Pete Chidley.
Hello, everyone.
Well, welcome, folks. Hope your week is off to a good start. Couple things in housekeeping before we get into the Q&A. Just to remind everybody to please go check out the new blog that we've started, dvcfan.com, and the DVC Fan Facebook group, which is where these questions have come from. And the group has gotten very, very active very, very quickly. By the time this goes up, I think we'll be over 5,000 people in that group.
Nice.
A lot of engagement, a lot of great conversations going on. A lot of people really excited about being DVC members, and a lot of new people, new to the DVC world, coming into the group. So, which I am one of them, really. But I've been having to do this. I think I've gotten a crash course in DVC, so I'm trying to get as much information as possible. But my God, there's so much.
There really is.
There's so much, and you really see it. We could end up doing a 3-hour show here on the questions that were asked on that group. But let's jump in, and you guys do not know which questions I have picked. And I'm also going to wonder if Mr. Fiasconaro back there may have a question or two of his own as a new DVC member. So we'll let him be thinking about that. But I intentionally didn't tell you guys which questions I picked because I want a more spontaneous response.
Makes it fun that way.
So we'll start with Melissa, who asked 2 questions. Number 1, what is the smartest way to go when buying resale when you already own a direct contract? Is it better to add more points where you own or buy somewhere else and combine them to book at 7 months?
That's a really popular question. So there's 2 ways to answer that. My first question to Melissa would be, do you book over 7 months in advance? And do you have a second resort that you would want as a home resort? And if the question is yes, then you buy at that resort. If the question or the answer to that is no, then you're buying based on value. So at that point, if you're going to be using those points consistently under 7 months, then you want to buy based on value.
But even there, though, buying based on value, a lot of people may get caught up with Vero Beach or Hilton Head because those points are so much less expensive, but not factor in the maintenance fees on those, which are extraordinary. I mean, they're very high.
They are. So overall value would be a little more specific. So currently best overall value would be Saratoga
Springs.
Right. Years left on the contract, lowest annual dues currently of any DVC resort, and lower purchase price. So all things considered, if we're looking at it as a whole, it would be Saratoga. Hilton Head and Vero have their own advantages, which could probably be a different show because they are difficult to get into under 7 months in certain cases. If you want a beach cottage, it's nearly impossible. And we've done the math. Really, if you're going to own this for less than 8 years, which most people are not, but if you really feel like you have, 1 to 8 more vacations with Disney, then they're not the worst way to go either. So it really depends on the longevity and how you think you're going to use it.
So you think buying at Vero Beach, if you're not planning to use it for more than 8 years, is a good idea?
We've done the math on it, and it really depends on how many points you buy, because of course the more points you buy, the higher your annual cost is going to go. But there's a sweet spot somewhere between typically year 8 and 10 where you've washed out your savings on per point cost and spent more in dues. So it's not the worst value. It's only the worst value if you're going long term.
Okay, that's interesting. And then she also asked what our thoughts are on the resale value of Riviera. This is a really popular. Now, I mean, and to be honest, the question is nobody knows yet, because, you know, we're not even close to a contract. We're not going to start seeing the first Riviera contracts until next year. I don't think anybody's gonna buy one and then put it on the resale market before the resort even opens. Do you think?
You typically get 1 to 2 listings for a resort in the first few months. Before the resort's open, probably not, unless you just have somebody that got into it and really realized that they just couldn't afford it and they have to find a faster way out. But no, you're typically not, because you're going to lose money doing that. Normally, you'll see a couple of listings within the first 6 months. And so if you're pre-sale, it might be before the resort's open. It's really 9 to 18 months to see any kind of steady inventory. And that question's the $1 million question. So I've been with the timeshare store for many, many openings, and that question gets asked every time.
Well, this is unusual
opens.
in that, you know, Riviera is the first resort with built-in resale restrictions. So if you buy direct at Riviera and then put that on the market, the person who buys it can only use those points at Riviera. They can't use them at any of the other 14 currently existing DVC properties. So if you buy a Riviera resale contract and you get 200 points, that's the only place you're going to be able to use those 200 points. You will not be able to use them at any of the other ones.
So you just threw a wrench in it, because every other time, of course, that wasn't that restriction. So
Right.
that's what's going to make it difficult to value. Normally, when someone asks that question, taking the resale aspect out of it, what you just described, normally there's no ceiling. So the first owner, second owner, the third owner can put it up at whatever they want, and let's see what the market's going to bear. And it's typically going to bear, relative to Disney, slightly less, especially if you're talking about a small point contract like 25, 50, and somebody just wants a small number. Those will bear very relative cost. As more comes on the market, like supply and demand with any product on the market, as more comes out, the prices are going to equalize. But Riviera is going to be, it's a really good question, but very difficult to answer because of the fact that whoever buys it's only going to be able to stay at that resort.
Pete, I'm going to throw this over to you. What do you think the first Riviera resale contracts are going to look like?
Well, and I think the trick here also is the first contracts coming out are probably going to stay fairly high. I mean, you're as you pointed out, it's going to be a whole different dynamic, but you're still going to get what's the popularity of the resort itself, because there's going to be people that are going to say, hey, I love the Riviera, that's where I want to stay, I'll buy that contract. I think this is a general rule, when they first come out and there's not many of them out there, it'll stay fairly high. I think long term, and by long term I mean 3 or 4 years, when the resort starts to sell out and everything, I think it'll settle lower because of that restriction, because there'll be people that want that option to move into other resorts. I know that's me. So I suspect I don't think it'll be the lowest, because you're still going to have people that are going to like that location. I think it's going to be very popular with the gondolas, with the Skyliner. You're going to see a lot of people that, 5 minutes to the Epcot International Gateway and maybe 10-15 minutes to Hollywood Studios. It's going to be very popular. But my guess is it'll settle less than, say, the Poly or the Grand Floridian, more, but maybe a little bit more than say Animal Kingdom and Saratoga Springs. I think that's where it's going to end up.
You think so, Jackie?
That's what I was kind of thinking too, because I feel like with the Skyliner, I feel like they're gonna sort of treat that as almost the same as being on the monorail line, but not quite. I mean, you'll have access to 2 parks with the gondolas. So, because for a while I was thinking that with that restriction, it might make the value on it a bit lower because of the restriction and not being able to use it everywhere. But the gondolas are going to make a difference in that, and I think I agree with what Pete's saying, because I think it's going to be somewhere between Saratoga and then the real higher ones.
Right.
So
Fiasco.
So my question is, how low could this really go?
He's having to adjust his volume.
Hello. Okay. My question is, how low could this really go before Disney just takes it back with right of first refusal, the Riviera complex?
Well, they usually don't take them back on right of first refusal as long as it's still actively selling.
Correct.
So as long as Riviera is still selling direct, they're not gonna take any of those contracts back. But okay, I think this is going to go one of two ways. The resale restrictions are going to be an absolute disaster, and Riviera is going to end up hovering somewhere around $90 a point on the resale market. Or they are going to open a true luxury, not deluxe, because that's not going to be good enough, a true luxury resort. And it becomes the must-have property in the portfolio. And then I think you are going to see it rivaling Poly and Grand Floridian in its resale prices. That also assumes that Disney doesn't make any changes to the resale policy. And I'm just going to say this because I don't have it on great authority, but some of the rumblings I'm hearing from inside there is that this isn't selling well. This is not selling well. And the reason it's not selling well are the resale restrictions. They are not getting buy-in from existing members, because the reason a lot of people feel comfortable paying a lot more for a timeshare than they would pay anywhere else is because they know the resale market is healthy, and that if for some reason they need to change, they need, like, their life circumstances change and they need to resell these, that they're going to recoup at least some of the money. I would never suggest to anybody that you go into a resale contract as a way to make money. Would never suggest that. But if you can vacation on it for 10 years and sell it and get back 70, 80, maybe even 100% of what you paid for it, then you just vacation basically for the price of your dues. That's a pretty good deal.
yeah.
So that is one of those things that says to people, okay, you know what? I feel more comfortable taking this risk, because it's a risk. We're not talking about buying a $3,000 cruise here. We're talking about a $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 real estate interest. So knowing that there is a resale market for it, you're not going to buy a house for $500,000 if you're fairly certain that when it comes time to sell it, you're going to get $200,000 for it. You're not going to do that.
That's right.
And I can speak from my perspective as somebody who was going in to buy DVC and was actually considering, I was going there to buy Riviera originally when I first did my tour. I was pretty set on that. And then after the tour, I was more leaning towards Copper Creek. And then talking to the agent more and more, there were really 3 reasons why I steered away from Riviera and went to Copper Creek. The first reason was that resale restriction, because not that I want to sell my contract or sell my points or anything like that, but I would just like to know that what I was buying was maintaining a good value. And because of the uncertainty of that, that steered me away. The other thing that steered me away was that my points wouldn't even be good till later in the year. So
Right. If you bought them now, they're not good until the resort opens.
Right.
Exactly.
So that kind of made me be like, oh, well, I don't have that immediate gratification of going to stay somewhere, right away too. And then the third thing was, I was really looking forward to getting my name etched somewhere on the resort. If they were doing the name etchings like they did at Bay Lake, I might have said, oh, forget the other 2 things that are steering me away. Let's go with Riviera. But because they weren't immortalizing me on Disney property.
It's amazing how many people bought Bay Lake just so they could get on the fountain.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I believe that.
And what Jamie's talking about is the charter owners, the first people to buy in to Bay Lake, got a small plaque around the fountain in the courtyard, which was really, really cool. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you want to, I understand that, but I wonder if I wonder if Disney is not either going to relax the resale restrictions on Riviera or eliminate them altogether, because I think they may be rethinking it.
They might have to.
I think they're going to have to.
Mm-hmm.
Pete?
Going on the boards, I think you're seeing that there's a lot of people on there that are not happy with those resale restrictions and won't buy there because of that. Now, there's still some people that are buying anyways and saying, well, I don't care about selling. I'm buying this for me. I don't need to worry about selling. But a lot of people, and myself included, I would be hesitant to buy there because of that. But I also wonder if a little bit of the problem there with their sales is that the resort's not open. So you're investing all this money in something you haven't really seen. I mean, you can go and look at the rooms, but that's not the resort. You're not in the room 24 hours a day. You want to know what's the restaurant's going to be like, what's the pool going to be like.
Well, how has it been for them in the past when they've pre-sold?
I was going to add to that. My experience, I've been there, long enough to pretty much see a bunch of new resorts open. And typically when a new resort is announced, we get flooded with calls of people that are going to sell their existing contract and rebuy. It's just known. It happens for every resort. Animal Kingdom, Bay Lake Tower, Grand Floridian, Polynesian. You get a flood of calls. People say, I want to own, I want to sell, go ahead and position myself to sell my resale. Once I close on the other one or before I close on the other one. We're not getting that this time. We're not getting people calling and saying that they're going to sell to buy Riviera. I don't think I've personally taken one call, and consistently as a whole, I think the office has discussed that we're not getting those calls, and we've gotten a lot of them for every resort that's open, and it's just not happening this time.
Wow.
But you also got the case that this is a brand new resort in a brand new location. If you think back, the last 4, at least maybe 5 resorts that have opened have been an existing location. If I'm buying at the Grand Floridian, I don't need to see what that DVC resort looks like. That resort already exists. I can go there, I can visit, I can see what it's like.
Very good point.
Even Copper Creek, right? They converted rooms. So you knew what you were getting into. You knew what you were going to have from a resort perspective. Here we don't.
Well, I guess the question that could be asked then, did you see that when Alani was announced?
We did. I wouldn't say to the degree that we saw Polynesian, Grand Floridian, Animal Kingdom, but we did. We did from a lot of... we also saw a huge uptick, obviously, in non-owners that were West Coast based, because other than Grand Californian, they didn't have a lot of options other than coming to Walt Disney. So yeah, we did see it more with Alani than we've seen with Riviera.
Okay.
But we know a lot of things about the resort though so far. I'm trying to really figure out what is in it for them making this restriction, legitimately. Because we know there's going to be character dining. We know the pool looks fabulous. We've seen renderings of it. We know that when they build it in real life, it looks pretty darn similar to the renderings, right? So there's going to be a lot of different... You're going to be able to see fireworks from not only Epcot, but Hollywood Studios as well from some of these rooms. So, plus, like we talked about a few minutes ago, the Skyliner is pretty fabulous. It seems like that's going to be a really great way to just, I just don't understand. Usually you can figure out what's in it for Disney, and it's always money, right? So with this particular restriction, I can't seem to figure out what exactly it is that they are thinking that they're benefiting by putting this restriction out there.
I think they're under the impression that if they put the squeeze on the resale market, more people will buy direct. I don't think they're seeing that.
They're not. And I think what they forget is that people are always going to need to sell. So if you talk about the top reasons that people sell, it's financial, it's divorce, it's death. Unfortunately, all 3 of those terrible things and terrible reasons to sell. But when you buy a contract 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you don't have any idea what the future holds.
Right, exactly.
And I think that there was always that safety net, as you said. Even if you bought through Disney, you had an opportunity to sell if needed. And I think that Disney's just really missing the mark to think that people aren't going to need to sell. They think it's a want to sell. And the majority of people that we speak to, it's not a want to sell. They're coming, they've sold everything else that they can sell. They've done everything else that they need to do. And this is the last thing. Right. Yeah. So you can't control that. And I think that's the mark Disney's missing, is that there's always going to be people that need to get out of the contract for one reason or another.
And I think Disney wants to create an environment where they can buy these points back very cheaply, because you can sell your contract to Disney. You're going to get a fraction of what you're going to get on the resale market.
And the interesting part is that only Disney buying it from you directly only started a few years ago. Previous to the last couple of years, if you contacted them, they referred you to a resale broker. They mailed you information in the mail to contact the timeshare store to list your points. And the option to sell to them directly is only something they've come up in the last couple of years. Yes.
Interesting. Yeah.
There was never an opportunity to sell to them previous to the last few years.
I didn't think so. I didn't think I had ever heard of that before.
It wasn't existent. They would refer out.
Wow. I mean, it makes sense, but yeah, see, it's really, I find it really fascinating to try to sort of figure out what they're thinking, and I can usually kind of figure it out, but this one has me a little, like,
this definitely feels like something part of a larger plan on their part,
yeah.
But I wonder if they're not rethinking it. All right.
Yeah.
I want to, this question, my friend Kyle Miyamoto, who I owe lunch to, I have 320 points, 260-point contracts at the Grand Californian that he got for, wait for it, $90 a point. I have never used points at the Grand Californian, so the 11-month window doesn't apply to me. Would it be worthwhile? Yes.
Yes.
To sell? Is that what he's asking?
Would it be worthwhile to sell those points and rebuy resale and end up with cash? I don't know about the extra fees.
I can't yell louder than Pete with a yes. I mean, I remember the days when they sold for that. I was there at the inception of Grand Californian resales, and there's some people that got in the 80s per point resale. So the demand didn't go up until Disney was done selling it. So the demand spiked hugely when Grand Californian was done being sold through Disney. The only place you could get it was the resale market. So we saw a huge jump, and obviously now they're hovering right around 180 to 200 a point. We don't know how long this market's going to sustain. I mean, if you had asked me 3 years ago, would someone pay $200 for a Grand Californian, I would have said no. The market's not going to bear that. We didn't think it was. But it is. And
it is.
And for a 160, 200 is not out of the mark. And if you rebought at a monorail resort, so let's talk, higher numbers, you're still rebuying, probably in the 130s, maybe 120s, maybe 140, depending on what you get. Even with all things considered, commissions paid and costs to transfer and things like that, you're still putting enough money in your pocket to go and enjoy that on another Disney vacation. So yeah. I would 100% yes, absolutely. If you're not using the 11-month booking priority, sell it while the market, because again, who knows how long this market's going to sustain.
And the only fees for somebody selling is the commission, which is 8.5%.
8.5% and $150 transfer estoppel fee for Disney, which is a financial report. Buyer pays all closing costs. Buyer pays annual dues on active points for the year. So that's it. If you don't have a mortgage, it's really 8.5% and $150. So sell it. Take that money and go on a nice Disney vacation and make somebody else who wants 102 people that want 160 points at Grand Californian extremely happy. Mm-hmm. They'd be gone. Don't even think about it, Kyle. They'd be gone in a matter of days. So.
Those contracts, I'd probably buy one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to give it to me, I'll give you $100 a point for it. I'll be good. You'll make $10.
You'll buy him 2 lunches.
Yeah, really.
Tough but fair.
Yeah, really.
I'm a giver. I'm a giver. I'm here for you guys. All right. Kelsey Hopkins asks for new young, she puts in quotes, meaning under 30 DVC members. There's only one of them in the room right now. What would be the most logical location to buy and get the best value and time span? So, Mr. Fiasconaro, being the resident millennial DVC member, where do you think the most logical location to buy to get the best value and time span?
So I was just going through this whole process very recently, obviously, and like we were just talking about earlier, there was Vero Beach, and while Vero Beach is very appealing because of the low price per point, the annual fees are higher than the other places. So in my mind, whether you get a 10-year plan or a 5-year plan, or you do what I'm going to do and pay my first contract off very aggressively within the first year, I don't see that really being, unless you want to go to Vero Beach. If you want to go to Vero Beach, that's one thing. For me, I don't plan on going anytime soon or at all in an 11-month window for that matter. So for me, because I want to get that contract paid off, the maintenance fees kind of turn me away there. So then we're left with, the other options. We have Old Key West, we have Saratoga Springs, we got Copper Creek, we got Riviera. Those are the other ones that were kind of floating in my brain too. Old Key West kind of, for resale specifically, Old Key West kind of made me not so interested because of the lower time left on its contract. And what I was really looking at was Saratoga Springs and Copper Creek, what it really came down to. I ultimately decided to go with Copper Creek because it hit on a lot of the points. It's a place that I would definitely want to stay. It's a place that if I was to book in advance in an 11-month window or maybe 10 months out, it's probably the place I'd want to go for, like, if I was planning a big family vacation or something of that nature. But if I were to sit back and say, okay, what do I think the best value would be if you were, a millennial like myself, just trying to get the best bang for your buck, I came to the conclusion that it was Saratoga. I mean, unless the 11-month window really matters to you and you're planning on booking in that window, if that doesn't matter to you, the best bang for your buck is ultimately going to be Saratoga because of what it comes down to is the price per point for that resort. You're going to be able to use that at any Walt Disney World property in the 7-month window. And then the maintenance fees are relatively low. So all things considered, that would probably have to be the one.
But it does bear reiterating because I see this mentioned a lot on Facebook. I see it mentioned a lot on the boards. Buy where you want to stay. Buy where you want to stay. And that was the one thing I did listen to.
It's 100%. That's the first thing I start with. When someone asks me that, I immediately say, but my follow-up question to that is, are you going to book over 7 months? If 90% of the time the answer is no. If you're not going to change your vacation habit, then you don't need to buy where you want to stay.
Well, the only reason for me, the one time I'm willing to book the 11-month window, New Year's Eve. So I made sure I had contracts at every resort I would want to stay at on New Year's Eve. Beach Club, Boardwalk, and Bay Lake Tower.
Yeah.
That they're where I want to be on New Year's Eve. So for those, that's the only time I really want the 11-month window. Although I'm finding out now that it might be more advantageous too for me to have the 11-month window for certain members of my family who like to travel in the fall that I need to get rooms for, because October, November, December, forget about it.
Yep.
Very hard to book. Even at Saratoga.
Yeah.
Even at Saratoga. Very hard to book. DVC members like to come in the fall. So that's been...
But buy where you want to stay if you'll book in advance. I mean, that's like you said, you would change your habit for New Year's. You would do that. So yes, 100%. But if someone's adamant to me that their life just doesn't follow that path, then why would you spend $140 to own Grand Floridian? Great that you own there, but you're not going to get any more leeway with Disney when you're calling 6 months in advance than someone that paid $100 for Saratoga. So the key is you either have to change your travel habits and book over 7 months, which you really should be doing anyways, because that's how you get in, or you have to kind of go with Saratoga. So to answer her question, I would say 2, and I'm not to make a generalization, but she asked about young, so I'll answer it that way. I don't think she could go wrong with Saratoga. If you're at Disney Springs and the transportation is stopped, you can walk back. I've done it many times. So it's a great location for being close to doing a lot of more nightlife type of things versus the parks. I like Saratoga. I know there's all sorts of threads on the boards about Saratoga. I love it. Different people have different opinions, but value-wise would be Saratoga. A very close second would be Animal Kingdom. The only reason I would follow that up with a but is that it does have higher dues. But if Saratoga wasn't your preference, if you needed to book at 11 months, then Animal Kingdom gives you a nice opportunity to book at 11 months. So that would be my secondary follow-up for her.
And I want to give a shout out for that I think is kind of a hidden value is Bay Lake Tower. And the reason I say that is even though the points aren't cheap there, you have, number one, you have very long contract life for it, but also you have to look at they have the standard view rooms, which are lower point cost. And those rooms are very hard to get into at the 7-month, but if you own there, you can get into those lower point rooms. So one thing people tend to neglect when they look at value is how many points per night do things cost. It isn't just how much the points cost, it's how many points you got to use.
How many points do you have to use? Yeah.
At Bay Lake, if you want to get some value there, you own those points, you can use them to book the standard view rooms, and now you're paying a lot less money per night than you would be at, say, the Poly or the Grand Floridian, which have a much higher point per night cost.
Okay, well, let's follow this discussion up with another question by David Erridge. How much emphasis should be placed on 2042 resorts, those resorts where the contracts expire in 2042? These are the originals that were opened back in the 90s. If you're buying in the next couple of years, how much emphasis should be put on 2042? I'm in my 50s, but would like to pass on contracts to my kids. Well, I can speak from my perspective. I didn't care about it. I don't have children, and unless something extraordinary happens, I don't think I'm going to. And I'm 54, so 23 years from now I'll be 77. I don't know how worried I am about that. But the other thing I know, I'm certain that at some point, Disney's going to turn around and say, hey, listen, give us another $10 a point or another $15 a point, and we'll extend the life of your contract. There's no way. They're just going to let these expire in 2042.
Well, they've already done that. They did that they did it with Old Key West in 2007. So they offered an extension. If you reacted within a certain period of time, it was $15 a point to take it. So that was 2007. Took it out to 2057. And if you reacted after that time, I believe it was $25 a point. So if you want to get more into that, the rumor was in 2007 that they were going to extend all 2042 resorts, excluding Hilton Head and Vero. So they weren't going to do Hilton Head and Vero. But it didn't go over as well as they originally hoped, and the rumor died very quickly. So I'm with Pete that at some point, it's been one of the most successful business ventures they've ever done for the Vacation Club, and I'm certain that it would make sense to do it. I think they just did it too far in advance when they originally did it.
Yeah, so I think that's probably what they're waiting for, because at some point. But now I can understand it from Fiasco's standpoint, that, here's 27, 28?
I'm 28, about to be 29 in October, but yeah, for me it was kind of a big deal. It was a major determining factor in what I bought and what I wanted, because if 20 years versus 40 years or more, that makes a big difference to me. And not only just for me, but I think it's comforting that you own this piece of property, and having a large chunk of time on it versus not having a large chunk of time on it, I don't know, that matters a lot to me. And I think that matters a lot to the not just the value of it, but the value of it to me.
Sure, because if you guys have a lot of time. If you guys have kids, you guys have, I think it depends. I didn't even really, I saw the big far away year when we bought, and I was like, that's a long time from now. I'm good.
And to answer his specific question, I think this is kind of what I tell people every day. If you want to be at Beach Club, you have to not worry about the years. That's the reality. If you don't own there, you're not getting in there under 7 months. So I bought at Wilderness. Yes, I bought in 07, so there was a longer lifespan. But it wouldn't have mattered to me if there was 5 years or there was 50 years. I wanted to know that every year when I went to book that resort, I had the first opportunity, and that's how I was going to stay there. So if you're in the mindset of a particular resort that expires in 42, you have to let the years go. You just have to, because that's the only way you're going to be certain. So the best comparison I can make is I would have rather known I was going to get to stay at Wilderness Lodge for the next 20 years than to have extra years on a contract, but I couldn't stay at the resort I was most interested in. So you have to make a hard personal decision. Some people, the years matter, some don't. In his case, if you have a particular resort, I wouldn't even put age into it. If you have a particular resort and it expires in 42 and it's not Old Key West, which is typically easier to get at 7 months, then you have to kind of forget the years and just know that you're going to have all those great years at that resort.
Yeah, I agree with what Jamie's saying. The one thing is that you do have to remember that value on that contract is pretty much going to go to zero by 2042, right? If you're thinking about, I'm going to sell this contract in, when my kids get old enough, I'm not going to want to keep going to Disney. I'm going to sell the contract in 15, 20 years. Well, in 2039, that boardwalk contract is going to have 3 years left on it. You're not getting $140 a point for it.
No.
3 years left. You're getting $20 a point. So that's the one thing to remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't think, I don't know. They'll come up with something where they're going to extend these contracts. But,
They will.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. They're going to extend it, but that's still not going to leave you value in the contract for resale necessarily.
All right, one final question. Didn't even get to all the ones I had here. We got a lot of discussion out of these. From Chris Alsop. What are the advantages of buying DVC instead of renting points for people who usually stay at Pop Century or Art of Animation? I'll give my initial response to this. Generally, the conventional wisdom is that if you generally stay at value resorts or even moderates, DVC, comparatively may not be worth, you'll spend more. But, and this was something Jerry said in one of our first shows that really just stuck with me, that when I stay at a hotel, I'm giving them, let's say I'm paying them $1,500 for the week to stay in that room, right? Let's say $200 a night. Let's go for All-Stars, and let's say $150 a night. So I'm giving them what? Little over $1,000. Well, once that week is over, that $1,000 is gone. I'm not getting anything back for that. I'm just getting that. Yet, what I'm paying for DVC, that regenerates every year. So again, if and I'll use Fiasco as an example. Only ever stayed at the Values, right? Just had his first day as a DVC member at Boardwalk. And what did you say to me sitting in the office earlier about that?
Well, yeah, the Boardwalk was way nicer than All-Stars or anything that I've ever previously stayed at on Disney property, with the exception, I stayed at Wilderness Lodge, but I was about 12. What did I say in the office earlier?
Well, you were saying that this was by far the nicest resort I've ever stayed in. And don't you consider, is there value in that for you versus staying in, because you are now a DVC member, you're paying for those points?
Oh, without a doubt. And also what I'd like to add is the way I see it and the way I consider it is, once you really break it down, if this is something that you want to do long term, I would even go as far as saying, as the people who stayed at the All-Stars every year, this is for them too. Because that's who I was. I was somebody who came down here 2 to 3 times a year before I moved, and we would always stay at the All-Stars to be able to do more trips. But if you're that kind of person too, in the long run, it's still going to eventually pay for itself. If you're somebody who plans on doing vacations like this every year, every 2 years, I see it still paying for itself, even if you are somebody who stays at All-Star. That's how the math kind of worked out to me. But yeah, it's a big step up being able to stay at the Boardwalk and have my own little kitchen area, even in a deluxe studio. That deluxe studio is very spacious, and I still love All-Star. I've never really had a problem, and I felt like when I stayed at All Star before, like I felt good about paying the price I paid for it. The way I described it was, it's the best hotel in the area at that price point. That's how I felt about
Right.
that. But still, huge step up staying at Boardwalk, having your own kitchen area and everything like that.
All right, Jamie, I'm imagining you get this question a lot.
I do. I'll look at it from the financial perspective. So typically DVC, the initial purchase price is going to be a 4 to 8 vacation return. You're not going to see an initial return in one vacation. So if someone calls me and says, I'm planning a huge vacation, I don't want to put $5,000 into accommodations, I'd rather put it into a DVC, that makes sense. But my next question is this the only vacation you're taking? Have you not been to Disney in 5 years? How often are you going to go? So 4 to 8 vacations before you've paid for the property, and that's typically via resale. Then you just have your dues. And as we know, like let's say dues on an average are $1,000 to, say $1,500 a year. That's 2 nights in a studio at Bay Lake Tower paying cash, maybe.
Oh,
maybe.
but it's also, take a look, something else Jerry had mentioned. Take a look at what you're paying in resort fees. When you stay at a resort, at any of these hotels paying cash, you're paying resort fees. And depending on how often you're there, that's either a big chunk or all of your annual dues. Because you're not paying those resort fees when you stay on points.
Correct, right. So, if you're going, so the break even for someone staying at a value is going to be longer than someone staying at a moderate, than someone staying at a deluxe. So, to answer her question easily, your break even is going to be much longer. You're going to have to keep the ownership and use it. So you need to know that that 4 to 8 vacations really might be 8 to 12 vacations. Before.
And just because you're saying it fast, 4 to 8 vacations, not 48.
Yes, sorry, 4 and then the number 8.
So I had to stop for a second. Wait, is she saying I have to take 48 vacations on a contract before I get my value
yes, get
back?
out there. No, between 4 and 8 actual vacations, and then you're just paying your dues. You've paid for the cost of the ownership at that point. The other thing that's you have to look at is this is apples and oranges. So you can't compare an apple to an orange. So you're talking about a value, even a moderate. You're getting, as Fiasco said, you're getting a kitchenette. In a 1-bedroom, you're getting a full kitchen. You're getting a washer dryer. You feel more like you're at home.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the typical hotel feel. You feel like it's your space. So I think that it's hard to make an even dollar comparison when they're completely different accommodations.
Yeah.
But easy enough, 4 to 8 of those vacations. So her break even, if it's 1 trip a year, her break even may go into 10 or 12 years. But at that point, you own it. You couldn't stay in one of these resorts, really any resort, for those costs.
True.
Mm-hmm. And for me, I can speak for those folks that before I bought into DVC, we only stayed at values or moderates, mostly moderates, but we stayed sometimes at some Pop Century. And quite honestly, I did the calculations, and it would have been a pretty long time to break even on the values. The moderates, it was something like 7 to 9 years break even. But once I bought in and I actually stayed at the resorts, it just took my vacation through the roof. I mean, they're so nice, and honestly, at this point, I think I actually saved money faster than I would have, having continued to stay at moderates, because I mean, we're getting, our rates in rooms are much, much less than what we would be paying at a moderate with DVC. That's buying resale, of course. If you buy direct, it's going to be a lot longer break-even period. Yeah. But it's really up to the individual. But if you think you're going to continue to come for 20 years, there's a lot of value there.
Most
Agreed.
Definitely. Yeah, I remember when we were talking about that, and I think I was sharing that when we first vacationed as a family all together, we stayed at the Disneyland Hotel in 2 separate rooms, and it was like somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000 or $6,000 for the week that we were there, just for accommodations. And then when we ventured out here to Disney World, we got a 2-bedroom villa at Old Key West, and it was $5,000 to $6,000, maybe even $7,000 or $8,000. And so when we got back home from that vacation, that was a huge chunk of money, and you didn't have anything. I mean, of course, you have your wonderful memories. You had a great time. But but when I started looking at resale contracts, when I really started doing it was when they started to redo the tree houses at Saratoga Springs, because that was what really got that started to float my boat, because we had a vacation at Old QS. So anyways, it depends on how often you vacation and how much you're spending and where you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that's going to do it for this round of Q&As, because that went longer than I thought it was going to. But we'll be sure to do this again in the coming months. So that is going to do it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'll be back with you again next week with another edition of the DVC Show.